What I wanted to just start out with is, we advertise talking about the outcomes of a Montessori education, and that's a pretty hard thing to do, because if you think about your own education, and this is all of you, and we're all in different, stages of life here, but if you think about your own education, first of all, who thinks they got a good education? I really think I did. Like, I really appreciated my education.
Certain parts.
Yeah, sure.
Parts, yeah.
And then the harder part is this. When did you know that? Like, when did you know that? Like, when did you have perspective enough to say, that was a really good education? And I think this is this is the difficulty of my job, of Annette's job, of Ashley's job. Because technically, and you are a businesswoman, we're selling a product, the benefits of which won't be seen for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, right? It's akin to parenting, right? When do we know we're a good parent? When our child's 35 and in therapy and telling them they had a good childhood? Like, we don't know that. And so that's where I think when we talk about what we want for our outcomes of education, right, it's a really hard thing. The other thing that makes it really hard is we have a number of people in the room, and if I asked each of you to define success, we'd have that many different definitions of that. Like, what's important to you? What does that look like? And so when I get parents to talk about this, I want to first get an idea of what's important to you, or how would you define your own success. Let's not talk about your child, right? But how do you define your own success? Like, what do you think? What do you think? Or how would you define that success? Human success, adult success, and we're just going to go around the room. I'm going to totally put you on the spot, right? Mm-hmm. But how do you define success, Lucia?
Some measure of happiness and success in terms of being able to sustain your livelihood, not necessarily in whatever that means to you, so that you can thrive and find moments of joy, and for those around you too.
Excellent. How about you, Christina?
So what she said, definitely. And then also just as a parent, seeing that my children are making good choices, doing things that are, I think that they're taking care of themselves and being independent, and I feel that makes me feel somewhat successful. Like I've done an okay job here with that.
I think for me, it's balance. Mm-hmm. Whatever responsibility you have, whether it be in your relationships or with your business or your family ties, just finding happiness in each one of those, not just one, I guess, like being versatile in what you look at as success.
Awesome.
At least that's what I try to do.
Yes, everyone had very good answers, and I agree. But I also feel like it is happiness or financial success too.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And yes, your family, how the kids are growing independently. Mm-hmm.
That's great. So thanks for sharing. There's research that has been done on Montessori education, right? And it shows over and over again the same things that they see in adults who went through a Montessori education. And there's more research that needs to be done. And you can look up, you can Google research Montessori outcomes, and you'll get a whole host of things. And some of them, some of the research studies were focused on things like language acquisition, math, test scores, things like that. Some of it was more focused on social emotional behavior, but social behavior. And then some of it was like personal characteristics, things like that. Things that come up in all of these studies all the time is that level of independence of the students when they're coming from a Montessori program, the ability to problem solve, the consciousness about being part of a community, right? That's a really big piece. They understand, we talked about that beautiful environment for a few minutes. It's like when there's only one of the item you want, You have to figure out how you're going to both use it and share. And then, like I said, some of it goes into language and math and more academic skills. The most recent article that was referenced in Forbes, I shared with the parent body at the bottom of a depressing letter in December when I had to say, by the way, we're coming back in January in the middle of another spike, so masks on, everybody. And so, but I said, as a nice distraction, read this. And it was really about highlighting the long-term benefits of a Montessori education in a paper that was published in Frontiers in Psychology. And I think that was this was such a positive angle, given that we're coming out of the pandemic, because it provided more evidence that a Montessori education may be superior to traditional methods of education, especially on measures relating to students' long-term psychological health and well-being. And this is something we're super focused on right now. We've had 2 years of isolation. We've had 2 years of disruption, and we've had 2 years of students really absorbing what that means for them personally, but what it means for their parents, adults, siblings, older folks from around them and in their homes. And the definition of well-being, or that felt experience of health, happiness, as Lucia pointed out, and flourishing, predicts several desirable outcomes, including better physical health and work performance, better longevity, and more positive social behavior and relations. And this article was really, it really struck a chord, I think, is that, excuse me, what was really surprised the authors was that every single subset of data they looked at, it came up. They looked at whether they were in private or public Montessori programs. They looked at whether they were there for 2 to 4 years or if they were there for their whole life. They looked at all these things, and in every single cut that they took in the data, it came out over and over again, this higher level of well-being, right? And so I think that was really, I think that's what made this one different. And this is, I think, what made Forbes pick it up and other magazines pick it up, because this has been the talk of the town. And we've seen lots of articles about how not only children, but adolescents, adults have been suffering, right? Suffering in terms of well-being and mental health. And so it was kind of a little ray of sunshine, I think. We have here at Post Oak our own set of data as well. We take a look at our testing data aggregately. We're a school, we do that, grades 3 through 12, whether we're looking at our MAP testing, which is our measures of academic progress, or our PSAT testing, or how our students fare on ACT and SAT. The testing data, and of course that's a big conversation right now, how valuable that testing data is, even colleges who are eliminating the testing requirements. However, it gives us a little bit of a baseline to kind of see how we're doing. And we see over and over again our students doing well, and we get the information we need to say where are areas we can do better. We have an impressive list of college acceptances, and I printed off some of those sheets now so people could take them with them. And then we have the testimony of our alums. And I did want to show just 2 small and quick clips of our alumni speaking about what it is they took from Post Oak and how it's serving them now. Mostly these are college students or post-college students, just post-college students, and they went through or came through our high school as well. So you want to hit play on that first one. Let's see.
I need to interact with my professors in college. I have no fear in emailing a teacher if I need help, or speaking up in either a Zoom class or in a person class and ask for help.
Now it's a little bit more of a habit, but before it was kind of teaching myself, and Post-Oak teaching me how to say, after everything I do, what did I learn from this? What can I take away from this? And how will this apply to my future?
We learned how to talk about hard things in literature. and we learned how to communicate what we thought in a respectful way that was understandable for other people.
Big thing.
Yeah. So that's just a quick one. And can you toggle to the next one? Here we go.
I kind of compare a Montessori education to a liberal arts education in many ways.
Can we turn that up?
In the sense that a Montessori education doesn't really teach you what to think, but rather how to think. It really encourages you to question everything, really just engaging in critical thinking on a really serious level.
One of the things that's really nice about Post-Oak is that if you want to do something, you can get that together. If you find the people, you ask the right teacher, you can get that to happen. And so I feel like that kind of environment has helped when I got to college, actually going out and doing things. So when you get to college, nobody's forcing you to do anything. So having to actually go out, find the clubs you want to join, find the events you want to go to, and actually doing them is something that I feel like I did a lot better than a lot of my peers.
And Post-Oak really taught me how to turn that drive and that desire to improve whatever into actions and into getting those things done. And that's been especially relevant to me now and recently, sort of at the tail end of a pandemic where I graduated in the pandemic and started my first college year.
The balance between IB and Montessori, kind of those two different approaches to education worked and meshed really well and set up a kind of a great environment to become prepared for college. And then now that I've graduated college, become prepared for like future careers post-college.
I went through a very long job search trying to find what I wanted, and Post-Oak instilled this strength in me to really believe in myself and keep going, and that perseverance that it causes you with having such a rigorous curriculum and community is really helpful.
I also see it in myself when I'm with my students. I'm constantly kind of throwing in little Montessori tidbits about the growth mindsets, about collaborating with teachers and encouraging sort of their own exploration of their interests and passions, and learning and giving kind of those interpersonal and academic skills that I got, even if you don't.
Okay. So just kind of a clip of these things that aren't necessarily measured on a test, right? So the things that they talked about, my son always tells me, he's like, I'm the only one who talks to my professors at school, Mom. Like, I'm the only one who goes in there and has a conversation. When I get a paper back and I got a grade that I didn't think I deserved on it, or I had questions, I'm like, what did you mean by this? Or if I, got a test that I had a question about, and he also started college in the pandemic and everything was online, and he said that I'm the only one talking on the screen, like I'm just engaging. Those things aren't necessarily measured on a test, right? But those are the things that get you what you want and, get you to start your own business in Seattle because somebody said, design my house. I think that's what, those are like, seeing those as outcomes are so much more beyond, what focus in more conventional education or focus can feel like when we've grown up in I grew up in a very conventional thing, which is it was about getting to college or, all those, like these things that, and the getting to college one is one I always try to push back on parents. Like, it's the most important thing is the college they get into. And I kind of want to say, I want you to think about college. Was that the best version of you? And that getting into college is important and getting that, but like to have that as the end goal, like the end goal needs to be further out. The end goal needs to be, I want them to have a life. The end goal needs to be, and I say this jokingly, but not so jokingly, that they're not living on your couch at 35. Like, they are out in the world, right? Like, the end goal needs to be more than just this kind of thing that we put on a pedestal, which is like, it's about where you get into college. Montessori kids get into great colleges. Montessori kids, one of my favorite things to look at on graduation day is when I look at the program, we list all the colleges they got into, and then we bold the ones they went to. And I always love looking at what they left on the table. you know, like, no, no, no. And I'm like, oh my goodness, these are amazing colleges, but that they had that choice going into school. And so we have our own sets of data, but one of the things I like to do in this particular presentation is to gather different data, which is to really have you guys as the audience members tell me what it is, right, that's important to you. And so we're going to do this a little differently. We're going to spend about 4 minutes at 3 different stations, all of you as a group, okay? And so I'm going to make you get up, and I'm going to give you the instructions first. So the first one you're going to come to is over here. Just stay seated for a second. So we've got this one over here, which says academic skills. And if you're investing in a Montessori education, what are the academic skills you expect your student to get whenever they leave here, right? Now, for some of us, that's high school, and it may not be for everyone because life happens and they move. But if you're sending them to school here, what are some of the academic skills that you want to make sure your student gets? Can you remove that one over there? The second one that you're going to go to is one that says personal characteristics. What are the personal characteristics that you want them to develop? These are these innate things inside, right? So that empathy or that courage to go talk to a professor, that kindness and that sense of community. And then the last one over here says social skills. These are actual skills that you want them to have, whether that's communicating in a respectful manner. One of my favorite social skills that we often don't realize is a skill, which is how to make and keep friends. That's a skill. Those are things that you can learn how to do, right? How to be inclusive, right? How to share difficult information. Also a social skill, all right? So how to recover from mistakes, creativity, problem solving, work ethic, communication, self-awareness, empathy, optimism and hope, and inner strength. So if we can think of a grown adult with all 9 of these, right? They're going to be pretty successful no matter what your definition of success is. The part of this, this presentation that is not in the room is that I could bring in 10 different Montessori teachers at 10 different levels and say, give me 3 or 4 examples of how we develop this in the classroom, right? And we see it every single day, how to recover from a mistake. This starts at super early age. It starts at a super early age because we have these hands-on materials in which if the child makes a mistake, no one's saying, that's wrong. They're saying, it didn't work out. I need to do this again. So the materials, without any emotion, can show them where they have to try again and do it again. One of the biggest gifts we give to a Montessori student on their way out, and I know this from students I taught, but also my own son, is that Montessori students learn what they're really good at, they learn what they have to work hard at, and they don't have any hang-ups about it. And I remember my son, he took a biology class his first year in college, and he went up to the biology teacher and said, I need to sit right in front or I'm not going. It was right when they got back in person. And he said, I need to sit in front or I'm not going to pass this class. Because he knew that science for him was a stretch in his head and he needed to be paying attention, right? And he didn't have any shame about that. He wasn't trying to hide that science was hard for him. So we work on that. Creativity, we're one of the most creative pedagogies there are. We're also really courageous too because we ask 3-year-olds to make a choice in the classroom every single day and they just forge in and do it. But the creativity, and again, we started out talking about this display of the history fair that's to my right and just how they're not told there's a ceiling. They're not told you have to do this within this box. They're told this. What do you want to study? How do you want to present it? What do you think is important for people to know? And that leads to so much creativity. You know, even saying, I need to design something for on top of my little display board, right? And go beyond that, including the New York City skyscape, which is amazing. Problem solving, because we start out with those hands-on materials, because we start out with experiences, and everything, the way that they're learning is through those experiences. Learning how to tie their shoe, you'll get there where you're just sitting there going, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, we gotta go, but they need to do it themselves, and it takes you forever, and you will be late for work, and that's all there is to it. But they've solved their problem, they've learned how to tie their shoe. The work ethic, you know, Montessori kids want to work. We give work a positive connotation. That's the big thing. They're excited about work. And I learned this early in my career. I taught traditional school, then I taught Montessori elementary, and I remember like having this big group, and I went into an established Montessori class, and we were talking about all these things, and I'm like, does anybody have any questions? And the hand went up and said, can we get to our work now? Because it's fun work, it's engaging work, it's challenging work, and so they really engage in it. Communication. Again, I gave you the example of my child being the only one who goes and talks to his professor, learning how to do seminar when they get into the middle and high school grades. But, you know, they're communicating all the time. Language is, you know, rampant in the environment all the time, all of that, those pieces. Modeling things, you talked about manners, and the communication piece is really part of that too, because we model something called grace and courtesy. We teach a young child, how to walk around somebody's work. And we give them the lesson because it's a skill. We don't assume they know how to do it. We give the lesson to the child to, you know, we want the child to learn how to open a door for someone, right? How to cover your cough or blow your nose, how to greet somebody when they come into the room, how to wait your turn. These are things we do and physically show them and model for them so that they can learn that. And that's part of that communication, and it's part of the self-awareness and being a part of community. Personal characteristics, being that part of the community, working on that self-awareness. Lots of examples of empathy. We have very, very, very small toddlers who know when somebody sneezes to go and get a tissue and hand it to them. And they're 18 months old, right? And they learn that at a very young age. Optimism and hope. I dare you to find any place where there's happier children than here, because they come in with wide eyes and ready to explore, and they're given that creative freedom to explore, and that makes them optimistic about learning and moving forward. We also, every trained Montessori teacher is trained to see the child who hasn't arrived yet. We're constantly looking for the child who's developing and growing, and the child's at the center, and we have faith in them all the time, and that turns into them having hope about everything else in the world. And lastly, inner strength. Again, they learn how to recover from mistakes. They learn how to handle disappointment. We watched a whole bunch of them handle 2 years of disappointment, of not being with their friends, of getting back in here, of wearing masks and covering their faces, of having to be separated from their buddies, having to be separated from other classes, and then how to recover from that. They practice that inner strength on a daily basis because they're in an environment that's set up for them to succeed and fail in a safe manner. You know, we have often had the children who forget their coat. And as a young mother, I would be worried about my child not having the coat. But the child learns once when they're cold to bring their coat the next day or to remember those things. And so we give them those opportunities to fail, knowing that it's Houston and they're not going to freeze to death, right? It's not 20 below, but they might be a little cold, and that's a good thing for them to feel and understand. Or if their shoes get wet because they decided to splash in the puddles and an hour later they're uncomfortable, they can make a better choice the next day or bring an extra pair of puddle boots, you know? And so those kinds of things build that inner strength as well, giving them the opportunity to do as much as they can do and giving them only help that's necessary. And so all of these things happen in a Montessori environment. Every time I do this list is different. And but every time I do this, there are things that are the same. As a grown-up, you know what you need. When you're in it in education, you can't recognize whether or not you're getting a good education or not. But as a grown-up, you know what you need to succeed. And so a lot of times these things come out. Communication, always on that list. Problem solving, always on that list. And some version of optimism, hope, kindness, empathy, always on that list. Because those are the things that are going to make you be comfortable in your adulthood. So, questions? Yes.
What I have found so the few times that I have seen you give this presentation is that what is always off of that academic skills list is what you might have assumed first, like math or science or whatever.
Yeah,
that never rises
test taking
to the
skills
top.
never goes to the top.
Yeah.
Test taking for sure never gets to the top, right? Sometimes math and language, but it'll come in a way of like, you know, a lot of them like to combine, but it'll say, you know, math and language literacy. That's a great academic skill for them to have, right? And then some groups will say, yeah, but you can't even get there if you can't problem solve, right? And so then they'll knock that off the list. And some really nice other academic skills that didn't show up on this list today are things like a global awareness. That's an academic skill. They're like, we want them to know there's other places, kinds of people, you know, we're sharing the planet with 7 billion others. We need to understand that. That's one that has risen to the top, ahead of math and literacy.
And a lot of times when I've seen you do this with a group of about 75 people, and in our community where you have so many different cultures, you'll get a lot of different responses to it too, which I think is really great. So the list grows in ways that, you know, you might not have thought about.
Yeah, and there's great psychological experiments to do from this presentation when you have a room with that many people too. One time I did it in California, and one of my teachers came up to me and said, every single person standing in the personal characteristics group is a CEO. And I was like, oh, you're right. They skipped academic skills and social skills altogether, and they just went there. And it was really interesting. It was really interesting that they were like, every single one of them is a CEO. And I was like, oh. So what do they know? What do they know about running an organization? So it was really very interesting. Other questions? I don't know where our 25 RSVPs went, but you know what? It still works. It was still worthwhile, and it was just a great morning. So thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You're welcome.